I don't know. They might have come close to exposing the core.
If that's true, then we came very close to the China syndrome.
The what?
If the core is exposed, for whatever reason, the fuel heats beyond core heat tolerance in a matter of minutes. Nothing can stop it. And it melts right down through the bottom of the plant, theoretically to China. But of course, as soon as it hits groundwater, it blasts into the atmosphere and sends out clouds of radioactivity. The number of people killed would depend on which way the wind is blowing. Render an area the size of Pennsylvania permanently uninhabitable, not to mention the cancer that would show up later.
Well, this week marks the anniversary of the atomic catastrophes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. Today, Japanese attention turns to other nuclear concerns. Tensions in Japan are rising over the radioactive water leaking into the Pacific Ocean from the country's crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, which was devastated by the earthquakes and tsunami of 2011. Joining me now in studio to discuss the radioactive leak is Paul Gunter, director of the Reactor Oversight Project at BeyondNuclear.org. Thank you for being here, Paul. We really appreciate your presence. Now, I'm going to start off by asking you, can you tell us how long the contaminated water has been, how long the contamination has been leaking into the water?
Very likely since the explosions and the meltdown at Fukushima Daiichi in March of 2011.
Wow, that is quite a long time. Now, how much and what sort of radiation is leaking into the Pacific? I know there's all different types, so if you can explain that in a little detail.
Well, clearly what we've seen now is the movement of radioactive hydrogen, tritium, which is a mobile radioactive isotope, but clearly radioactive cesium, 134, 137, strontium-90. We're seeing a full range of radioactive contaminants now moving, which indicate that the damaged cores of these reactors, the meltdowns themselves, are now contributing to the contamination of the Pacific Ocean and groundwater that's moving at about a rate of 300 to 400 metric tons per day. So, but these numbers are really only approximations and will vary, but clearly a lot of radioactivity is moving through groundwater into the ocean.
Now, why is the plant continuing to leak? You'd think they would have, or maybe they already have, taken steps to contaminate some of this leakage.
Well, they have, TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, put up a temporary wall between the reactor wreckage and the ocean, but this has really acted nothing more than just like a dam, so that the water is building up behind the dam, and now it's breached the dam, it's spilling over, and the radioactive contamination is moving into the Pacific. But right now we're seeing the Japanese government is in chaos. The fact that the revelation of this extensive contamination is coming now more than 2 years after the accident occurred indicates that it's completely out of control. And the command and control is in chaos in Japan right now. And really the big question is, why aren't they calling international aid to address the radioactive contamination of the Pacific Ocean?
Why do you suspect they aren't calling international aid?
The problems are, I think, clearly that there's no transparency, and the government and the industry, as documented by the Japanese Diet, their Congress, is that there's been a collusion all along. And so what we're seeing is a veil being drawn over the accident to promote an agenda for the restart of these reactors in Japan, and to try to contain the bad news rather than the radiation.
That's very concerning, because the radiation is much worse than just the news itself. Now, what can be done beyond these dams that you mentioned before in terms of contaminating the leakage?
Well, in order to contain the leaks, we have to isolate the radioactive waste. But indications are right now that the reactor structures themselves have been breached. It's very likely that some of the radioactive material, the melted cores, have moved into the earth, and so the containing, it's beyond containment right now. I think that's the tragedy that we see unfolding as Fukushima's radioactive water crisis is only beginning.
That's very concerning. How far has this radiation spread, and how fast is it going while it spreads?
Again, some of the radioactive isotopes are more mobile than others. The radioactive tritium, the hydrogen, it moves anywhere water goes because it is radioactive hydrogen and makes up a component of water. So the spread of the contamination is only going to be as effectively monitored as the technology is out there. And frankly, we don't know the full extent. Nobody really knows the full extent of the contamination at this point as it moves through not only groundwater but also through the atmosphere and into ocean currents. So we're in a very grave situation right now, as the Japanese government has declared this is a new radiation emergency coming out of a worsening situation at Fukushima Daiichi.
Now, what does this mean for the people of Japan and around the world?
I think that certainly the concern right now is that the people of Japan want more transparency into what their government is or is not doing about this uncontrolled radioactive catastrophe. The meetings that are going on right now between industry and government are behind closed doors. So the Japanese people are asking for more transparency to get a better understanding of just how out of control this whole situation is. And that's going to be true for New Zealand, for Taiwan, for Korea, for China, for all the immediate Pacific nations, but ultimately it raises concerns for radioactive contamination in the ocean currents in the Pacific.
Well, very concerning. We appreciate your insight into this. Thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you.
That was Paul Gunter, Director of the Reactor Oversight Project for BeyondNuclear.org.
If the core is exposed, for whatever reason, the fuel heats beyond core heat tolerance in a matter of minutes. Nothing can stop it. And it melts right down through the bottom of the plant, theoretically to China. But of course, as soon as it hits groundwater, it blasts into the atmosphere and sends out clouds of radioactivity. The number of people killed would depend on which way the wind is blowing. Render an area the size of Pennsylvania permanently uninhabitable, not to mention the cancer that would show up later.
Live, this is One for the Record. I'm Diane, and today is August 11th, 2013, and here are your news updates for today. Alright, nothing's changed on the Watchers. Nothing's changed on the Extinction Protocol 2012 and beyond. Breaking news has reported about an hour ago that there has been 2 earthquakes on the big island of Hawaii. I don't have any details on it yet. It happened about an hour ago. Now we're moving on. E&E News, the Energy News. Report. The people of Japan are responsible for poisoning of world's food chain due to Fukushima catastrophe. They have to stand up and take action. The buck has to stop somewhere. Also today, NBC Nightly News. Urgent situation after frightening discovery at Fukushima. Planned ice wall shows TEPCO is grasping at straws and can't stop plant leaking like a sieve. Now almost 900 straight days of contamination flowing in Pacific. Also today, nuclear leaks poison the Pacific. We're talking about the Pacific Ocean, so it's not just Fukushima that's affected. Criticism will be worldwide if contamination keeps flowing from plant, but it's been flowing for 900 days. Why are they deciding to talk about it now? Why is it only on the nightly news? Why isn't it 24/7 coverage? Alright, TEPCO. We've known for 2 years that massive amounts of water flows under Fukushima plant. Official unable to explain why they kept secret. Yeah, why? I think someone should ask why. People are are getting ready to get in a lot of trouble. Why was it kept secret, mainstream media? Maybe something could have been done sooner. Okay, U.S.-Canada. E&E News, Energy News. FDA paying attention to leaks at Fukushima. Do not worry about radioactive fish. How dare they? Will test seafood as needed. Yeah, they can eat it. They could be the taste testers. How's that? Like in the old days. Maybe they want to be the taste testers. Alrighty then. It's 2 days down to the weekend. You still got some time on Sunday. Take care. Now I'm putting on the information on Nibiru from coast to coast. And since it sounds like we have some time yet on that, I think starting Monday we'll have a little more of a variety show. You know, we'll put some entertainment on there. And I like showing entertainment that has nothing to do with machinery and what people can do themselves. Alrighty then, and if the power goes out, here's some entertainment for you guys that you can watch. Alright, take care, be prepared for anything. Now see you tomorrow on the flip side. I might attach Dr. Deagle's NutriMedical report when it shows up and I can get it onto this channel. But other than that, I'm going to still do other stuff I think I'm going to put on here. Just to mellow out a little bit on all this stuff. We need a break from all this stuff, but here you go. Stay tuned. I'm adding Nibiru on here.
And the nice thing is he had a good little camera, and he took, you know, I told him what he needed to do, and he did that setup and was testing it. And we thought for a bit he just had some interesting pictures of this triple conjunction that was pretty unique. But as we got into it, we found he actually had imaged the brown dwarf in the core of the Planet X system, which is right now behind the sun. He caught it close to the sun around the 7 o'clock position. And it was just something where, you know, our motto on the team is believe nothing, observe everything, and leave no stone unturned. And we were, you know, George, it was just something where, you know, we were just thinking, well, it was a great effort on his part. And it's so hard because I always have people talking about, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and then they just evaporate on you. And this guy's a soldier. I mean, he's really out there. He's on fire to go find this thing. And we found it in this image where it was 4 degrees north of the equator, and we find the triple conjunction, but we also find that there's a fourth object in this picture, which is in my new video, Planet X Observations and Orbital Path Analysis, on my site at yowusa.com. And all of this is demonstrated, but he nailed it. He caught it. And one of the things that we do is, first off, it's visible to the eye, and this is a visible light observation, which is really unique. The approximate distance right now is about 2 Jupiter distances out.
Okay.
So it's still a pretty good, but it's inbound. It's right now, having captured it in May, at this point it's probably coming up nearer to the ecliptic, but it's also, we can't see it, the sun is blocking it right now, and it's going to stay that way for a little while. We are able to do an orbital path analysis to see where this thing's going, and what we used is, we have our object at Turrialba. This object that we've been monitoring, Blue Bonnet, is an outermost orbital of this system, and this is now 3 cameras that we're seeing it on, and they're 3 completely different camera systems. The first one back in 2010 was a standard definition, and then in 2012, late 2012, they got a high definition system, and then we started observing in this year, and now on the 3rd one. And so there was this young gentleman who back in 2010 was, for some reason, just inspired to go capture the volcan feed and put up videos of that feed capture. And so we had this object back in 2010, which was showing up not as long. I mean, now it is, when we were watching it on the volcan feed, the duration was much longer. It was a few hours. But we were able to get a plot on it, approximate its location in the sky in 2010, and then we had our observation from 2013, and we used that plus Jorge Arenas' image of the brown system dwarf, and we were able to approximate an orbital path analysis. And so, if you want, I can just give you kind of a look-ahead timeline of...
Okay, and then give us a refresher on Planet X, Marshall.
Will do. Planet X is... We've been looking for Planet X for hundreds of years. This is not anything new, and the term is a generic term. And it just simply means an unknown object or body. And you know it's out there because of the way it interacts with bodies that we are already observing. So, for example, we can see as far as Saturn with the naked eye. Once we invented the telescope and Saturn was observed, and there was perturbations in Saturn's orbit, and they started looking for its Planet X, and then, you know, that took us all the way out to Pluto through the whole process where, you know, Uranus and Neptune and then Pluto. And Pluto, of course, turned out not to be Planet X because it's only about 60% of the size of our moon, so it didn't have the mass to be Neptune's perturber, which means that the game is still afoot. And there's an awful lot of, for years, even, you know, go back in my interviews, gosh, you know, it's been a decade of being on Coast and talking about Planet X, and I can remember back when I was just telling, you know, we don't know what it is. It could be a comet, it could be a rogue planet, it could be gosh knows what, but we know it's out there. Now we know that it is a mini constellation. It has a sun at the center of it, and we have spotted one of its outermost orbitals. And right now, the core of that system with the brown dwarf is, like I said, it's if you're looking at the sun, and the thing of it is that people have to understand that you have to adjust your view for not the Earth's horizon, but the ecliptic, the plane of the solar system.
It must, Marshall, though, let me ask you, it must be doing something or will do something devastating, or they would have told us about it, right?
Well, it's already doing devastating things. I mean, I'm looking at sun activity, and, you know, I mean, gosh, hey, George, how much, think back to before 2012, how much time were we all talking about the big solar maximum of 2012, 2013 that NASA and everybody else was predicting, and instead of this big slam you in the head solar maximum with all this high activity, what we wound up into was, you know, this camel hump back, you know, kind of like a two-hump camel. So we have a twin peak solar maximum where the first peak was pretty weak. Now we're in this trough, and we're seeing these coronal cavities that are just stunning. I mean, we recently had a coronal cavity. It was like 25% of the size of the sun itself, and now we're seeing these coronal cavities. Stereo B right now, which is actually it's on the other side of the sun from us, and Stereo B is pointed at the sun, and it's looking, if you will, over our right shoulder. Stereo A, which is the other stereo spacecraft, that's A, that's for ahead, and it's looking over our left shoulder. And but NASA has said they're not actually looking in the direction that we've been looking, which is straight into the sun and looking in the areas around it for objects. They don't have anything pointed in that direction. That's their story. What we did was we developed a technique called camera sensor illumination. This is something that
That's a first.
I teach in. Yes, it is a first, and it is something that I teach in this video because I want people to have a research tool that they can use on their own with freely available software and information on the internet, so that, you know, I said, okay, if we lose all these webcams, we lose all this stuff, what do we got? Well, we got cell phones, we got high definition smartphones, and we've got prosumer digital cameras. And what I did was, the whole point of camera sensor illumination is not so much the object itself, but it's what's around the object is what you're looking for. And literally what you're doing with this technique is you're letting this object, if it's a hot object and it's shooting photons of light at you, all right, a reflection, sundog, lens aberrations, defects, all this kind of stuff, they don't generate photons. All right, and what they do is manipulate what's there, and so we call those cold objects. But a hot object is literally going to backlight the water vapor in our atmosphere. And so I take the viewers through this step by step by step by step, so that, one, they can, you know, when we present the images in the video, I want people to be able to do it shoulder to shoulder. I think, you know, one of the things that's good about that is, you know, it's just always been for take my word for it. You know, who do we trust? Is this guy reliable? Is this picture from an honest source? Did they Photoshop it? You have all those what if questions. Well, with camera sensor illumination, you can look at objects near to the sun and you can determine whether they're natural or just reflections. And it's a really, really simple thing to do. And that is how we found this in the actual test when we got this original image of these four objects from Jorge. And he took a lot of pictures from that trip.
Are a lot of people seeing this, Marshall?
No, George, this is not. This particular picture was right place at the right time. His location when he took it was at 37,000 feet, way out over the Pacific to the west of northwest of Lima, Peru. So he was in an absolute beautiful spot for viewing skies. One of the things that's really important, and people don't realize it, the chemtrail spraying really does make it difficult, much more difficult for those of us, particularly when we're below the clouds, to see something. And so he was at the right place at the exact right time. He imaged it, and it was the first visible light, non-governmental observation of the brown dwarf sun at the core of the mini system, which is way, you know, it's a good distance out there and on the other side of the sun. And we're kind of in a dance, Earth and this object. We rotate about, you know, nearly the same speed from what we're seeing from following Bluebonnet, which means that, you know, the ancients, and gosh, I mean, we've heard this, we found this in so much research, and so have many others, that when this thing does pop up, it's like a thief in the night. Boom, you know, it just shows up. And it's because it'll come out from behind the sun and reach its point of perihelion. And that's when things really get rough. But right now, these coronal cavities are just stunning me, particularly the ones that Stereo B was shot. That it's on the opposite side of the sun from us now. We're not going to see it until it comes around. And for your listeners, a coronal cavity on the sun, a good way to imagine what this looks like is think of an orange, but the meat of the orange, instead of being orange, is jet black, black as coal. And what you do is you bite off a little chunk of skin here and you bite off a little chunk of skin there, and then you hold it out and you see something that is essentially what you see with a coronal cavity. And these are very prominent features. They're rather stunning. And we're looking at this. We're looking at the abnormal solar behavior. We're into a double peak solar maximum that completely blindsided NASA and everybody else. So I see that happening. I'm looking at what's happening with our planet right now, with our weather weirding. We have this jet stream displacement that's giving us, this is, for some people, this summer has been the coldest on record.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, can we expect some kind of huge calamity because of this?
Yeah. The timeline right now is, I would say, late 2013 to early 2014. The brown dwarf is going to be in a superior conjunction. That's on the opposite side of the sun, inside Earth's orbit. These are rough estimates based on what we're looking at. There's no way with this number of bodies in space to formulate a dead, spot-on, accurate ephemeris, where you can say it's definitely going to be here at a certain time, other than we have observed it, we've compiled it, and we've got a good idea of where it is and how long it's going to get there. But we can't set hard dates. These are just approximate dates. But end of this year, into the beginning of next year, I believe we're going to start seeing more severe interactions with our sun. And I'm talking about solar storms. Right now, there's been some X-class flares and things like that.
We've been lucky.
Yes, haven't we? And we have not been in the crosshairs. I don't think we're going to illuminate the water in the atmosphere. So, and this is something that's very easy for people to do. They can learn this and do it themselves. That was my big thing in doing this video.
Well, what would be your concern, Marshall, primarily about Planet X? What concerns you about this?
Wow. What really concerns me is what's going to start happening, I'd say, from 2015 on. This is, in 2015, first off, the outermost orbital, which right now we're tracking from a volcano at 10,000 feet. That's the whole problem, is that this stuff hasn't come close enough. It's visible below the clouds for the rest of us mundane mortals, if you will. And so, but in 2015, that object is going to become that outermost orbital, or the blue bonnet that we've been tracking. That's going to become visible below the clouds. We're going to be seeing that. But this is when this thing's going to be creeping up from behind the sun, and we're kind of converging in our orbits towards each other. We're moving. We did determine, looking at our orbital analysis, particularly on blue bonnet, that we are closing with this system. We're closing very slowly. And what will happen is this thing's going to come around. It's not going to come over the top of the sun, but it's going to come around more like around to the 3 o'clock position. It's at that, when it reaches its point of perihelion, and it's going to be sometime in this time that it does become visible to the naked eye for the rest of us here on the planet. But at that time, it's, when it enters the point of perihelion, this is in its 3,600-year orbit that takes it all the way from the edge of our system and into the core of our system and back again. The point of perihelion is its closest distance to the sun. So this whole mini constellation, which is a small brown dwarf, probably about twice the size of Jupiter.
And it's all traveling in unison, right?
It's all traveling in unison, and that system is in orbit around our sun. So it's not going to behave or look like anything else that we've ever seen before, which is consistent with what the ancients tell us. But when it reaches that point of perihelion, where it's closest to the sun in its 3,600-year orbit, it enters what we call the kill zone. And the kill zone goes from perihelion to the ecliptic. The perihelion, its closest point. Ecliptic is the plane of the system. And this is where we would anticipate the greatest number of interactions between the sun and this system, resulting in what I would just say, biblical scale solar storm.
Wow, that's huge.
Really going, yes. At that time, it is really going to slam us hard. And it's not going to do it directly. The sun is going to do the worst of the damage to us, and so we're going to have to deal with solar storms. We're going to have to learn to go to ground during the day, so to speak.
Well, and here we are without an insulated grid, Marshall, and we've been warning people for years.
Yes, you're absolutely right, George. And we're buck naked. But on the other hand, look back to in 2007, 2008. When we saw was just breathtaking for us, because NASA, JAXA, ESA, all of these space agencies have been putting up a veritable armada of solar observatories. For the longest time it was just SOHO, which came into being as a result of a solar storm that took down a huge chunk of the grid in Canada. And SOHO's an old bird. It should have been, it should have been deactivated some time ago, but it's like a Timex.
Keeps on ticking.
Keeps on ticking.
Let me ask you about the Hopis very fast, Marshall. Yeah. The Hopis talked about the blue Kachinka. And, you've somewhat talked about this planet with this hue. Are we talking about one and the same there, too?
Yes, this is consistent with the Hopi prophecy, which is the blue Kachina and the red Kachina. And what the Hopi tell us is that we see the blue Kachina first, and but then followed behind that is the red Kachina. And what the Hopi prophecy says is when we see the blue Kachina, we're going to have a certain degree of natural issues going on. But it's not until the red Kachina shows up that the guacamole hits the fan. So the blue Kachina is actually this object we have been monitoring since the beginning of this year from the volcan feed at the Turrialba volcano. It just was one of those things that we lucked into it. The feed is, most of your volcano feeds, George, point to the east, because people want to catch those spectacular sunrises, or they're going to be pointed down into the bowels of the volcano itself.
Are you more concerned about the volcanoes, Marshall?
I'm concerned about the volcanoes. I'm concerned very much when we talk about global cataclysm, it's like we've never really yet seen one single event that impacts the whole planet, all right? Not us in modern days. I mean, if we'd have been around in the time when Krakatoa popped, that would have been a different thing. But I think what we're going to see first, before anything else, is we're going to start seeing methane release. And because that's already trending, George, it's already happening. And there's two particular areas of methane that we need to be really worried about. There's the Arctic methane, which is up in the permafrost. The permafrost is melting. But also you have this humongous supply of gas hydrate that is locked up and is sitting off our continental shores. And the highest density of this methane gas hydrate is around the island of Japan. That's spooky. And the thing about it is that when this methane hydrate, if we warm up the oceans, this methane literally is called burning ice. They pick it up, they bring it up from the seabed, and they can just light it and it'll burn. But if the water gets warm enough, the methane will just start releasing. And then the problem is that we start getting into a positive feedback loop, because as a global warming gas. If you, for example, 1 pound of carbon is about, I think, 21 pounds of methane. Or excuse me, 1 pound of methane is the equivalent of 21 pounds of carbon. So it is a much worse gas for global warming. And we're already seeing natural release patterns are on the uptick all the way around the globe. Now, interestingly enough, methane from man-made sources is trending downwards a little bit. And so this is, it blows a hole in this whole anthropomorphic, it's all our fault kind of thing, because we're actually, ratcheting down on the methane a little bit. But natural sources and the releases are steadily upticking, and my concern is that we would hit, we hit a point where it's a feedback loop, starts feeding on itself, and then we're going to just see incredibly awful weather. So all of the things that we're seeing now, George, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Oh, boy.
And then we're going to, in a couple of years, what I'm saying in the video is, and I'm really loath to do dates anymore, but at a bare bones minimum, dumb luck, the universe smiles on us from soup to nuts. We're talking a 3-year thing, but could very well be a decade. So we're looking at a slow motion train wreck, and it just gets worse as it goes along, because as it's going through the kill zone, then the next thing is it's going to be passing back from the northern skies back into the southern skies.
Well, at what point, Marshall, does, let's say, NASA or someone have to come out and say something? At what point do even amateur astronomers start seeing this?
Well, I think that NASA, the government is going to tell us at the last possible moment. In terms of what NASA can see, as far as we're concerned, they've been watching this thing for decades. All right? There's a difference between what can NASA see and what does NASA tell us it can see. All right?
That's true.
And I think that, what you have is a situation where you would have astronomers and scientists there that would want to be forthcoming and talk and tell people, but what will happen is that you'll have someone from the security side that goes, no, we're going to put a lid on this.
A couple people in the past on this program talked about Planet X in 2003 rolling around. It never happened. So, here we are 10 years later. You're talking about 2015, and as you just said, you don't like talking dates. How could they be off by 12 years?
That's a good question, George. 2003 was the Nancy Lieder non-event.
Yes.
And Nancy is, I put a video up on it. She just started attacking a whole bunch of other researchers, and I don't know, she just kind of just went off the edge a little there, woo. But back in 2003,
was something going on? Was there
was nothing going on. In 2003, we had started our research at the end of 2001. Nancy Lieder says it's going to show we're going to have all these disasters. We're looking at all of our stuff, all of our indicators, and we're going, where's this coming from? I mean, and we were publishing, Zeta Factors, Zeta Hysteria was like one of the articles that we published. And we were up there at the front saying, hold on a second, can we be rational here? We were asking serious questions. A lot of people were turning to us for help. And George, I was getting emails from people that broke my heart. It was just horrible. You could see them struggling to phrase their questions and concerns, without looking like they're coming unglued. But the fear was just oozing out from every paragraph, like cement coming out of the, you know, when you're stacking brick.
Well, are we going to start that again by talking about 2015?
I think it's a different thing. 2003 was a tempest in a teapot. I think with 2015, I'm not interested in going down the Nancy Leader path. My position right now is December 21, 2012, all right, which was a media event principally driven by the cable channel. And I have no problems about all the ad revenue that everybody made on that. Because the fact is, December 21, 2012 was a line in the sand. That was a day that, you know, you had to be a hermit living in a cave in the Appalachians and still waiting for Richard Nixon to be impeached, not to know what that date was about. And it was a day for everybody to say, okay, I need to be observant. I need to see what's happening to my world and in my world, and I got to get out of the bubble. And so there were people that chose to do that and to look, but 99.9% of the world just goes on, you know, and it's back to show trials and hot dogs.
Well, and they always will. Marshall, we're going to come back in a moment, talk more about Planet X. We'll take phone calls next on Coast to Coast AM. And, of course, Marshall Masters with us. We're going to talk more about Planet X and, of course, take your phone calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. It's Marshall Masters. It's your phone calls as well as we talk about Planet X. Tie the Mayan calendar into this, Marshall. What's up?
Well, the Mayan calendar for me was just, you know, right now, and I mentioned it in my video, but there's this new discussion out there, and people are starting to go, how did this thing get calculated for December 21, 2012? Because there's a growing number of people. There's nothing going on. You know, in 2003, we had started our research at the end of 2001. Nancy Leader says it's going to show we're going to have all these disasters. We're looking at all of our stuff, all of our indicators, and we're going, where's this coming from? I mean, and we were publishing, you know, Zeta Factors, Zeta Hysteria was like one of the articles that we published. Well, I think it's a different thing. 2003 was a tempest in a teapot. I think with 2015, I'm not interested in going down the Nancy Leader path. My position right now is December 21, 2012, all right, which was a media event principally driven by the cable channel. And I have no problems about all the ad revenue that everybody made on that. Because the fact is, December 21, 2012 was a line in the sand. That was a day that, you know, you had to be a hermit living in a cave in the Appalachians and still waiting for Richard Nixon to be impeached, not to know what that date was about. And it was a day for everybody to say, okay, I need to be observant. I need to see what's happening to my world and in my world, and I got to get out of the bubble. And so there were people that chose to do that and to look, but 99.9% of the world just goes on, you know, and it's back to show trials and hot dogs.
Well, and they always will. Marshall, we're going to come back in a moment, talk more about Planet X. We'll take phone calls next on Coast to Coast AM. And, of course, Marshall Masters with us. We're going to talk more about Planet X and, of course, take your phone calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. It's Marshall Masters. It's your phone calls as well as we talk about Planet X. Tie the Mayan calendar into this, Marshall. What's up?
Well, the Mayan calendar for me was just, you know, right now, and I mentioned it in my video, but there's this new discussion out there, and people are starting to go, how did this thing get calculated for December 21, 2012? Because there's a growing number of people who actually believe that the correct date was this year, December 16th, 2013. And what was interesting, I point out in the video, Discovery Channel came out and they said that it was definitely December 21, 2012, because they carbon dated a beam in a temple. But they further go to say is that the date was it's a mythological date. And so I guess they carbon dated a mythological date. And we could debate 2012 as a false flag or however you want to call it. But it was a day of awareness, George, and there was no direct connection between that date and our Planet X research. It just seemed like there was this parallel interest that was tracking. But on the other hand, December 21, 2012 was good. It really gave people the wake-up call to say, hey, look, see what's happening, become informed, go beyond the mind-numbing, and think for yourself. And so nobody can say, when this pops up and it's visible and folks are going to go, I never knew, I never had a choice, I never had an option, how am I going to fight for my life? Look, folks, I mean, that was last year. It was December 21. That was the day of decision. You're either going to decide you're going to look or you're not going to look. And so for me, I really enjoy where things have gone now because it's quieter. We don't have all the noise. And it gives us a really good time to focus in on the work, which we've been doing for this. I mean, my first article on Planet X, I think, was January 2002. So I've been at this quite some time, and this is the first time, by the way, that we're actually talking about observing the brown dwarf at the core of the system, and with any kind of orbital plot that's based on observation data, as opposed to, well, gee, if it's behaving like a comet, where do we go? And on the other hand, I mean, I understand people are going to be skeptical because people expect the spectacular. That's what they really want.
Of course.
So, for me, it's really, I just kind of hunkered back and I said, who am I talking to in my research and what's important to me? And it's really to the people who I call the core audience. And they're principally driven by something that's affected their life, dreams, visions, premonitions, or they have seen something. As I've, in other shows, we've talked about my trips when I had a travel business to Russia and I was flying over the poles during the 90s, and I could see the Arctic ice melting in a slow, gradual pattern over the years. And this is back when we were still calling, anyone that talked about global warming was a tree hugger that chained themselves to a redwood. And I decided just to believe my lying eyes back then. So this really comes down to a point of personal choice. And I think that's the only way to really go at it. And that's the reason why in this video I put up on my site, YOWUSA.com, I give people the exact tools that we use to evaluate the imagery to say, yes, we have it. So that they could not only say, okay, well, I'm following with what Marshall and his team is doing, what they're doing, but also that they could become independent observers on their own, that they don't have to, if you have a few $100 prosumer digital DSLR, or even a HD smartphone camera, and you want to apply yourself a little bit, you're not going to be dependent on anybody. You're going to be able to go out, take pictures of objects that are near to the sun, and decide for yourself whether you're looking at reflections or you're looking at what I call a hot object, something that's pumping photons at the camera.
Oh, you think it's a hot object, don't you?
This is absolutely. It's a smoking hot object. As a matter of fact, there's a test. Part of what we do with this is I call it a gamma step-down test. Gamma is something that is it's a technique that was developed for desktop publishing in the digital age. It's a very new thing. You don't have gamma, world, and gamma's really what it does. It goes in and at the digital DNA level, if you will, to affect the overall brightness of that image. It's a very powerful setting. It's the reason why I tell everyone with this new technique, always start with gamma when you start doing the analysis, and you start backing this stuff down so that what you see is how hot is your object. And so the hotter the object is, the longer it persists, and you start with a default value of 1, go all the way to 0. When I took Jorge's image and I did that gamma test, when I got down to 0, there were only 2 objects left in the image that were hot: the sun and its smaller binary twin, and the 2 of them just bright with these beautiful bluish halo around the edges. And this, what amazed me, George, is that because I have spent years looking at this imagery. I got people every day, something's in the email box. Hey, looky here, I stuck my cell phone out through a car window and I got this here picture, and you tell me what it is, Mr. Expert. And
do you tell them? Do you say it's Planet X? No.
Oh, no, usually if I
can't see it with a cell phone.
You can't. Nah, cell phone is next to useless. And as a matter of fact, cell phones were, to give you guys, your listeners, an insight, historically, we started seeing cell phone sundog pictures coming out, probably around 2004, 2005. And there was a lot of them back then. And it's very easy to create cell phone sundogs with these little cell phone cameras, because I'd have to get in and explain the technology, but I mean it's basically one step above a Kodak Instamatic. And we were just getting all of this stuff, and it was professionally planted. I know the difference between yutzes and idiots and whatever that are just being cranks and clever, and I know the difference between them and people who do this kind of stuff day in and day out, because this is how they pay their child support. All right? And we were seeing all of this cell phone sundog stuff coming from disinformationalists. We track their patterns. They have a profile. They use a playbook. And they were inoculating the whole public so that the minute you would see these pictures, everyone would just get into this mantra of cell phone sundog, cell phone sundog, cell phone sundog, cell phone sundog. You're waiting for E to come down. Da-da-da-da-da. I mean, but it worked. It was incredibly successful. And this whole disinformation campaign came to a screeching halt when Apple came out with its first high-definition iPhone.
That was it?
That was it.
Let's take some calls here, Marshall. They're lining up here for you. Tim in Racine, Wisconsin on the wild card line. Go ahead, Timmy.
Hey, how you doing, George?
Good, Tim.
How's your guest doing?
Good.
That's good. I just have a quick question. I think I've actually seen what you're talking about. When you look, you kind of see like that rainbow color a little.
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, anyways, I got another question.
No, this is a bluish. You would have to look at my video, but it's not a rainbow effect. No.
All right. Is there a possibility that this object could actually hit Earth, or affect it in such a way that it could pull Earth, do something to the...
Well, it does a lot of things to the planet. I don't think it's going to hit it, Marshall, but it's going to do some weird stuff, right?
Absolutely, George. You nailed it. It's not going to hit us. Anybody who tells you this thing's going to hit us is feeding you the malarkey. That's not to say we're not going to have impacts. The first thing I show in my video is the increase in the number of meteor sightings is just going exponentially off the chart. Something is throwing rocks at us, and so we're going to have the impact events. Look at the Chelyabinsk meteor that hit Russia. The biggest thing to hit Russia, or the entire world, if you will, in over a century, and it completely blindsided NASA, and they said the reason why is it came out of the sun. And they don't have anything pointed in that direction, and which I thought was a better explanation than pray. But we don't have to worry about it hitting us. What I'm concerned, caller, is that it's going to, when it goes from its point of perihelion, closest point to the sun, that's where it's going to start heading back out into the deep space. And when it does that, it's going to be passing back down from the northern skies into the southern skies, but it'll be on our side of the sun. We'll be seeing it off and off to our right, and the concern that I have is as this is coming through, the gravitational forces would get a lithosphere lock on our planet and literally just swivel the skin of our planet around and following it. So what I am saying is that this thing is it's not going to hit us, but it will trigger a pole shift event on par with what Edgar Casey was talking about, which is not the planet flipping head over heels or stopping and moving again, but more of a few degrees in shift that is still going to be substantial. It'll cause the oceans to come out of the basin, and so it's not going to hit us, but boy, it's going to hurt us. It'll leave a mark.
Okay, we go now to TJ, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Hey, TJ. You with us?
Hello? Yeah, you there?
Yep, go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, I had a question. These events are going to happen. Could this be something that was described in Revelation, like how the third of the earth would be scorched with fire, and John said that he saw a new heaven and earth coming out of the sky?
Well, I think it's very close to Revelation when they talk about wormwood and things like that, don't you, Marshall?
Yes, as a matter of fact, depending on which version of the Bible you're using, the translation, but the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Hebrews called this object the destroyer, and depending on which Bible you're reading, the newer ones tend to be more accurate, and they go to the root on the words. They really dig down and go into the history on it. But I think that there's a lot more information about Planet X that is in the Bible than people would imagine. It's so much so that it strikes me as, sometimes I just feel like yes, as a matter of fact, depending on which version of the Bible you're using, the translation, but the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Hebrews called this object the destroyer, and depending on which Bible you're reading, the newer ones tend to be more accurate, and they go to the root on the words. They really dig down and go into the history on it. But I think that there's a lot more information about Planet X that is in the Bible than people would imagine. It's so much so that it strikes me as, sometimes I just feel like one purpose of the Bible was to encode this information so that it would be revealed now. And, we published a little book called Planet X and the Colburn Bible Connection. Greg Jenner wrote this years ago, and he went through the Bible and he compares Bible verses with other folklore, ancient wisdom texts, and when you look at it, you really realize that the Bible talks about Planet X a lot more than we give it credit for.
Well, that's true. You just got to read through it. You got to sift through the parables, don't you?
That's right. You got to sift through the parables, but it's also, you got to get to the etymology of the word. You got to go take those words right back to their digital DNA. What did they originally mean? So the problem that we have with finding the information is you have to get through the interpretation layers.
So you don't think we're going to have, massive earthquakes and things like that? Just the big volcanoes?
No, it's going to be everything. We're going to have earthquakes. We're going to have, just in the one thing, when it comes around to our side of the sun, which would be in a few years, first off, the sun is going to be enraged with all of this. It depends on how you interpret Revelation. But even in the Bible, it really seems to indicate that we are going to get a roasting. A real heck of a roasting. And I did a lot of study on Christian eschatology with a gentleman by the name of Robert Ryland, wrote a book, Jesus in the Third Temple. I was surprised. I mean, I'm a secular guy myself. I believe in God, but I just belong to the Church of Marshall, one on the rolls, and we don't do interfaith. But still the same, once I got into Christian eschatology, it's very, 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 very powerful. There's a lot of knowledge that's in there that's obfuscated, but it really does connect. And what it's telling us, that the stars are going to shift in the sky. We have this from other ancient folklore. So we're going to have a pole shift. In fact, it is my firm conviction that Noah, the flood of Noah, was a pole shift event, because in the Colburn Bible, there is the story of Sesuda and Hanok. It's very similar, talks about the same boat, 300 cubic, but it goes into much more detail. This was written by the ancient Egyptians. And when you start looking at where the ark is placed in the story of Sesuda and Hanok and how things are done, the only way they could have known where to place the ark in those circumstances, it had to be extraterrestrial intervention. It had to be somebody with the ability to map and model our planet from space. It's the only way they would have known, because the ark in the story of Sesuda and Hanok was placed at the neck of a long canyon that opened out to the sea. And it was put in a place so that when the ocean started coming out of their basin and you have these monster waves rolling in, that by the time the wave reached to the back of this long, long, long canyon, when it reached the ark, instead of going over the ark and tearing it apart like hydraulic sandpaper, it had been so expended that it just simply came from underneath the ark, lifted it up, and then took it back out to sea. And, you know, something like that, it's just inconceivable that someone would, I just know exactly where to put this thing, all right? No. And actually in the story of Sesuda and Hanok, mysterious strangers come to a king and tell him this is going to happen. And the king then hires this man to build the ark for him, and and selects a small army of artisans, craftsmen, and so forth, and they take animals. There's two stories between the Old Testament version and the Colburn Bible. A lot of similarities, just a lot more detail on the Egyptian account. So we have this history, George. It's been passed down to us, and it's been passed down to us in allegory. So we have to sift through, knowing what we know today, and to go back and really reread it. But there's a powerful, powerful lot of knowledge there. And Jenner did it. He had a little tiny book. It's a one-day read. I call it a my cup of tea read. You know, after that, you decide whether you want to continue exploring the topic or not. But when you see what Jenner did in that book, it just will take your breath away. It'll really be a huge impact for you.
All right, Marshall, we're going to come back and take some final phone calls with you in just a moment, and also get some more of your predictions about Planet X when we come right back. By the way, follow us, those of you who are not, on Facebook and Twitter by simply going to coasttocoastam.com and just click those icons up there in the far right-hand corner. Well, on our next Coast to Coast program, we've got more special things for you planned on Coast to Coast AM, so make sure you're part of it. And we will be back in a moment with Marshall Masters as we wrap up Planet X. Okay, on the for sure meter, Marshall, how sure are you that this is all going to come down?
100%.
Wow. And in terms of tragedy, something happening just as high?
We're talking about major dieback events. We're not talking about the end of humanity. We're talking about the end of life as we know it. But it's already happening. It's just right now we're at the sniffle before the sneeze stage, but this is going to happen. We've observed the objects. We're closing with them. They are already perturbing the sun, which explains this anomalous behavior that we're seeing right now. I mean, the sun is just Yeah, I mean, the experts can't predict what's happening. It defies prediction. And so this pattern's only going to continue to increase. And like I said, we're looking at something that could take as long as 10 years overall. But it's eventually going to close with us as it passes through our side of the system, and when it does that, then we would have a pole shift event, which is going to shift the planet a few degrees, and that would cause the oceans to come out of the basins, kind of like water sloshing out of a pail, and everything just is going to come because you have all this solar activity. So that energy's got to go somewhere. If you remember that movie 2012, they were talking about weird neutrinos, something that was energizing the core of the planet. Well, same thing. I think, more realistic is what's happening. But the core of our planet, it's like a tea kettle. Turn up the heat, it's going to blow steam. So we're going to have the volcanism. We're going to have seismicity. We're going to have a pole shift event. These things are going to be coming, and people are going to know that these things are going to come in the coming few years, and because the trends are just going to continue getting worse and getting worse. We can really try our best to ignore it, but I mean, after the weird weather we've had this summer with these massive heat waves on one hand, and other areas that are reporting record low temperatures.
No, it's bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, it's the question, George, is not when is it going to happen. The question is when are we going to actually start looking at what's really happening?
Back to the calls we go. Gerard, Ohio. Raj is with us. Raj, thanks for calling.
Hi, George. How are you?
Good, Raj.
Thank you for doing what you do. I appreciate it. I guess my question for Marshall is, having the right tool would really help out. That'd be like infrared. Marshall, do you work with or communicate with the group of astronomers called the the 00 Skyview team? And aren't they working, getting their hands on something that in the infrared range?
Skyview, we don't work directly with them. They're a very anonymous kind of a group. They've referenced us in some of their videos, and we've referenced them. We like their work, and they have their own infrared equipment. They have had this thing under observation for some time, and I really like those guys. So one day I'd like to sit down with them and have a beer. Yeah.
What would the headlines say one day, Marshall, if the mainstream decides to pick up on this?
Oh my God.
Just like that?
Just like that.
Oh,
we're toast. That's it. Voodoo time, baby. The guacamole is hitting the fan. First off, what we're going to see is an awful lot of trusted sources, institutions that are going to be moonwalking backwards to explain why, they didn't see this stuff coming.
Exactly.
Or didn't talk about it. So we're going to see all of this hand-wringing and trying to give themselves a pass. But, it's really going to come down to the people that are going to take a look at it and take action, and the ones that are going to remain in denial to the absolute last point. I call it the bliss of ignorance. When you come to this topic, something somehow, somewhere, someday rips the blinders off your head. You don't see the world the same way ever again. And the experience is about as warm and cuddly as getting slapped in the face with a dead salmon. And what you realize in that moment is that your bliss of ignorance is gone. You don't have that bliss anymore, and that's very unsettling. Well, now that the December 21, 2012 non-event, I guess if we want to call it that, with the Mayan calendar happened, or the dating of it, is people are going to be clinging to the bliss of their ignorance like jealous lovers as never before.
This is going to be interesting times.
Oh, boy. From your lips to God's ears.
Aaron is with us in Henrico, Virginia. Hi, Aaron. Go ahead.
Hi. Hi, how are you guys?
Good,
I'm
thanks.
really glad to hear this topic. I haven't listened for a while, so thank you.
Sure thing.
My head is just spinning with information right now, and I have to apologize that I'm not sure that all of it came from the show tonight, because I've been researching so much on some certain things. Most of all, every day, constantly, Comet Ison. And then also these Louisiana sinkholes, and going all the way back to the Chicago fires with the lady's towel tipped over the lantern, supposedly. But there are a lot of connections that this it's all kind of connected, that this was like a meteor shower that caused these fires, or a broken up comet. Now, this Comet Ison, if you really look into it, it's a lot bigger than what they're saying. It's supposed to be half the size of Jupiter, by calculations that aren't really being broadcast. And like you said just a second ago, the mainstream media, which, I mean, this show is Fox Radio, I believe. I mean, so this is mainstream media, but nobody's going to broadcast this because it's too scary to people who want to live in that, like, just complete oblivion, bliss, just
It petrifies them. They're scared to death of this.
Yeah, there's that. There's that. You know, Aaron, you're a seeker of truth, and you're trying to sort all of this stuff out. And you're the kind of folks that I like to write to, and to help and to get information to, because you're out there, you're doing it, you're beating the bushes, you're looking for answers. And Aaron, as frustrating as things might get for you from time to time, stick with it. One day, it'll click. You'll have a beat on things that's going to resonate with you, and it's going to give you a lot of internal strength to do what you need to do and move forward.
The flood during the Noah's era, Noah's flood, do you think that was caused by this planet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's what the Colburn Bible says that. Okay? Read the Old Testament. I believe in the Old Testament says the stars, went crazy. Definitely, the Colburn Bible, this is the ancient Egyptian accounts that were written down in the years following the Exodus. And they said it was actually responsible for Noah's flood, the sinking of Atlantis, and the 10 plagues of Exodus, which was this last flyby event. So this thing routinely comes through, and the severity of the effects on us literally depends on the 3 rules of prime real estate. Location, location, location. Where are we in relationship to it and the sun when it starts heading back south, down through the ecliptic and back out to the far out to the edge of our system? And if we're on the same side of the sun as it during that phase of its orbit, well, we're just in deep kimchi, that's all.
Let's go to Frank in Janesville, Wisconsin. Thanks for holding, Frank. Go ahead.
Hi, George. Nice to talk to you again.
You too, Frank.
I just have a statement to make. I happen to be a man of faith.
Okay.
And as far as I'm concerned, we're going to be going to our heavenly home sooner than thought.
I don't know if that's a good...
Jesus told us, "O ye of little faith." What can we do about it in the first place? We cannot change
Can't stop it.
the planet.
No.
Somebody else may change it. That's beyond our power, totally.
Well, what can you do about this, Marshall? Let's talk about that for a moment, because part of the other part of your book, Planet X Forecast, is an 2012 survival guide. How can you survive this?
There are ways to survive it if you're going to fight for your life, and that's what I'm really about, is survival. For example, solar storms are going to be bad. Well, in Planet X Forecast, we have a good section on how to build a home radiation shelter for solar storms using commonly available materials and a wide different selection of materials. Strategies for surviving on the move, strategies for surviving in place. In my other book, Crossing the Cusp, surviving the Edgar Casey pole shift. I talk about what the pole shift event will be like and who's going to survive that. And, you know, the caller is talking about a matter of faith and a matter of what is in your soul. And in Crossing the Cusp, I explain why the meek do inherit the earth, which is going to surprise a lot of people. They think that rich elites who are building these deep bunkers 2 miles down and they've got all these unlimited resources, nothing ever goes according to plan. They're not going to do that much better than the folks that are going to be on the surface. But what's going to pull us through is, who are you? What's your? Are you going to be in it for the species? You know, are you going to join with like-minded others, and are you going to give your all into a community? And in that sharing experience and planning and preparation, there's a lot of personal evolution that goes. If you get out of the denial mode and you get into the action mode, actually what happens is as you move along with that, you really do feel a sense of that there's a much greater, there's a bigger unseen hand at play. And that whatever you're going to do, you're going to feel that sense of mission within you. If you came to this life to be one of the many that are going to die in the initial event, then you're going to do that, or to survive it but not see it to the backside, which is what I call when we see blue skies again. But then those that make it to the backside, the thing is that everybody is going to play a crucial role. It doesn't matter if they make it to the backside or they die along the way, because this is going to be a massive consciousness uplifting experience that is really going to propel our entire species. We're right at, and I think, you know, earlier, George, you mentioned the Hopi, and and I dearly respect the Hopi. I grew up in Arizona, and I just like them as a people. But one of the things in the Hopi prophecy rock says we're at a junction point. If we keep going the way we're going to go, we're going to wind up being a slave species for countless generations to go, until finally, you know, we wind up with this barren rock of a nothing exploited planet, and we wither away and die. We become fossil records. Or we go, hold on a second, let's take that path of enlightenment. Let's go in the direction that our Creator wants us to go. Our Creator's throwing this monkey wrench at us and saying, okay, if you can turn this lemon into lemonade, man, you are going to see some impressive things. So I come at it with a sense of hope, and I come at it with a strong belief in God. But on the other hand, for me, the message of the universe is first, last, and always survival. You were given this fabulous life to live. Fight for it. Fight for it. That's the message.
Let's go to Josue, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. First-time caller. Hi there.
Hi, how are you? This is Josue Solak. I was going to tell you that in the Bible, one of the disciples asked Jesus, I'm Jewish, but one of the disciples asked Jesus, when would we know this is going to happen? And Jesus describes it like the blue katina, as basically the sun will stop shining, and all the stars will fall from the sky, and all the bodies in the Jewish, in the Hebrew Bible, it says that all the systems of the sky, which is the bodies of the universe, will cease to work as they usually work. And not only that, but I had dreams since I was a little kid that has told me that I'm going to go to Moldova, one of the caverns in Moldova, and 38 people will go there with me, and that's how we will survive this catastrophe. I know you just mentioned about that if people that are below the earth and you have resources, they're not going to survive as much as they want. I mean, they're going to survive. They're not going to do any better than the ones up on top, on the surface. But I believe that there's certain ways and places that you can't do that, because even when Jesus was telling that same story, he also mentioned that most of the people will run for the mountains, and most of the people will be living on top of the roof. And, there will be a lot of fear. And pray that you're not pregnant, and pray that it doesn't happen in winter.
Well, the fear is going to be enormous. I think it's going to boost religion, Marshall, don't you?
Oh, yeah. You know, what the ancient Egyptians tell us is that what we are going to see is going to scare us so bad, George, that men are going to be impotent and women are going to become infertile. Stop and think about this. What could be so powerful as to turn off a teenager's horny switch? Okay? If you got teenagers that are not thinking about sex anymore because they're so scared, it's got to be real scary. This is going to scare a lot of people. It is really going to...
And you say around 2015, though. I want to get these dates for people.
Yeah, from 2015 on is when things really start to percolate. That's what I'm estimating, based on our orbital path analysis.
Marshall, let's give out your website, if you would, and your books and your DVDs are still available for people fascinated by this. Spell your website for us.
The website is Your Own World USA. It's YOWUSA.com. And our YouTube channel is YOWBooks, YOWBOOKS. And the books that you would want to take a look at are Planet X, Forecast, and then also Crossing the Cusp. These are survival guides that are going to help you. And then the Colburn Bible, if you want to look at the history of all of this.
Very good. Marshall, thanks so much. We're going to keep monitoring this. 2015 is not that long away at all. At all. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Boros, George Knapp, John B. Wells, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition.